There can be also certain tax changes, and the price has been shown to be very difficult to make a very clear estimation of what the impact is in terms of CO2 emissions of our transport policies and projects. But the idea with MRV for NAMAs is it should be practical. So there is, of course, a component that you have to try to measure the GHG reduction compared to the baseline, but it's equally important to come up with indicators that show that NAMA is implemented, because that's in the end what we want to see. And the GHG reduction is just one component of MRV, and the methodology that will be used should simply be sufficient and appropriate to the country. We don't have to go immediately to the very high level of detail when it comes to CO2 emission reduction. Similarly, on the support side, this also needs to be MRV, so there will be a system to also monitor the amount of financial, technology and capacity building support that is given. Very briefly about MRV in the transport sector. On the left side of the diagram, I want to show historic data. This is called the GHG emission inventory, which are current emissions. This is usually done by the top-down approach. I'll come to that. So this is emissions taking place in the past. For the future, we need something very different to estimate future emissions as also the impact of the policies. So there are basically two approaches to do this. The top-down approach is simply based on the amount of fuel that you sell in a country or in a region multiplied by the emission factor, amount of CO2 per liter or per megajoule, and then you have the current emissions. And this is mostly the approach used in the emission inventories, which is very useful for that. However, to say something about policy impacts, this is not very it's not going to be very helpful. You need a bottom-up approach with a lot of data at the vehicle level, and that says something about the behavior changes and the changes in the system that are taking place. And fuel sales will not tell you much about the system changes that take place. So this bottom-up approach is also called, one of those approaches, ASIF. It's basically a multiplication of four parameters, which is the travel activity, so that's the amount of passenger or the amount of freight kilometers in a certain system.